Mike Babcock entered the NHL coaching ranks with a reputation as a disciplinarian and a winner. Over the years, however, multiple former players have come forward with stories of questionable and controversial treatment by Babcock. These incidents span from his tenures with the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, the Detroit Red Wings, Toronto Maple Leafs, and even an ill-fated return with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Former players of these teams have came forward with strikingly similar stories, public humiliations, personal mind games, and decisions that seemed less about hockey but more about power. These are the victims of Mike Babcock. Mike Commodore, a defenseman and Stanley Cup champion in 2006, has been one of Babcock's most outspoken critics. The issues with Babcock began in 2002 to 2003, when Babcock was a rookie NHL coach with the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, and Commodore was a young defenseman fighting for a roster spot. According to Commodore, he had performed well in the training camp, but Babcock buried him in the paper, publicly criticizing his play to make Commodore look bad and justify favoring another player that Babcock knew from junior hockey. Commodore alleges this was done so Babcock could promote his boy from juniors, who was an undrafted rookie at the camp that year. As a result, Commodore was sent down and eventually traded, missing the Ducks' 2003 Cinderella run to the Stanley Cup final. Fast forward to 2011, and Babcock was by then a celebrated coach of the Detroit Red Wings. Detroit signed Commodore to a one-year deal, despite the defenseman's own misgivings about reuniting with Babcock. Commodore actually phoned Babcock before signing, directly asking if the coach truly wanted him on the team. Babcock reassured him he was wanted and would get playtime, which convinced Commodore to join Detroit. However, once again, reality didn't match the coach's words. Commodore spent most of his time in the 2011 to 2012 season as a healthy scratch and rarely saw ice time. The only time I touched the ice was when the fourth line was on and the faceoff was in the neutral zone. I was opening the doors for Lidstrom. That's all I was doing, being a cheerleader, and I quote. It became clear to him that Babcock had no intention of giving him a real role. Feeling misled and stuck on the sidelines, Commodore was grateful when Detroit's GM, Ken Holland, traded him mid-season to the Tampa Bay Lightning, later saying, "He got me out of Detroit because Babcock was trying to end my career." The emotional toll on Commodore was significant. By the end of the season, it effectively was the end of his NHL career. Free from any team obligations, Commodore took to social media to vent years of built-up anger. In 2016, he labeled Babcock the biggest piece of crap on the planet in a hashtag-laced tweet. He accused Babcock of arrogance and deliberately ruining his career opportunities on multiple occasions. However, the bad blood didn't end there. After Babcock's firing from Toronto in 2019, Commodore unleashed celebratory rants on social media, indicating just how personally he hated Babcock and preyed on his downfall. And when allegations about Babcock's invasive phone inspection in Columbus surfaced in 2023, which we will get into later, Commodore didn't hold back to voice his opinion. All this talk, second chance, he's changed, it's all BS. He's pulling off the same stuff: power, intimidation, going through people's camera rolls. I mean, pervert, he's a pervert, Commodore said, commending Babcock's actions. Such comments underscore the long-term bitterness left by Babcock's treatment of him. Commodore has publicly called out Babcock multiple times in interviews, tweets, and articles. While Commodore's feud with Babcock stemmed from broken promises and career sabotage, he wasn't the only veteran feeling humiliated. Just a year later, in Detroit, another respected name, Mike Madano, would experience a similar kind of cold, calculated disrespect. In the 2010 to 2011 season, Babcock oversaw an incident in Detroit that many fans view as needlessly cruel: the handling of NHL legend Mike Madano. Madano had signed with his hometown Red Wings for a final season, hoping for a chance at another Stanley Cup run. Late that season, as he returned from a wrist injury, Madano realized he was approaching a major milestone: 1,500 NHL games, if he played essentially every remaining game. By the final week, he was on track to hit exactly 1,500 on the season's last day. Babcock, however, had other plans. He left Madano as a healthy scratch for the second to last game of the season, a home game against Minnesota, when Madano had 1,498 games under his belt. Babcock then put Madano back in the lineup for the finale, leaving him with 1,499 games, just one short of the milestone. The coach later phoned Madano and explained his reasoning. "Mike, we didn't bring you here to get 1,500 games. We brought you here to win a cup," Babcock told him. For Madano, who was a healthy scratch throughout most of the playoffs as well, the abrupt end at 1,499 felt like a slap in the face. It was a bitter pill, Madano admitted, being just one short of 1,500. After a prestigious career, reaching that round number still would have been nice, as Madano noted, and still remains a tough one to swallow. The media and fans widely criticized Babcock for this move, seeing it as an unnecessary denial of a veteran's moment. Even Chelios would later highlight what he did to Madano was incredibly disrespectful when recounting Babcock's misdeeds. However, even Chelios himself wasn't immune to Babcock's ego-driven decisions, especially when the spotlight was on. Defenseman Chelios, who played for Babcock in Detroit from 2005 to 2009, experienced this firsthand. Chelios was 47 years old in 2009 and nearing the end of his career. That year, the Red Wings were to play the Chicago Blackhawks in the Winter Classic at Wrigley Field, an outdoor game in Chelios' hometown of Chicago, and a special occasion for the veteran. Initially, Babcock planned to scratch Chelios for the Winter Classic, relenting only after GM Ken Holland and assistant GM Jim Nill insisted that Chelios be in the lineup. However, even then, Babcock played Chelios just for one shift, a mere 2 minutes of ice time, before benching him for the rest of the game. Chelios later said it was so unnecessary for Babcock to try to sit him in that showcase game. A funny story from the situation came later when Chelios revealed that he had the Red Wings trainer sneak him bottles of beer, sip from the bench, from a Gatorade bottle during the game, a story he told with a grin. Chelios retired as a player in 2010, but he would re-emerge in the Babcock saga a decade later as a truth-teller about the coach's mistreatment of others. In late 2019, after Babcock's tenure with Toronto unraveled, Chelios appeared on the Spit and Chicklets podcast and revealed a disturbing episode he witnessed in Detroit. Babcock targeting forward Johan Franzen. According to Chelios, during Game 5 of the 2012 playoffs against Nashville, Babcock blatantly verbally assaulted Franzen on the bench, unleashing on him so much that he had a nervous breakdown. Chelios didn't mince words about the coach's conduct, calling it the worst he had seen. Some of the things Babcock said to him on that bench, he verbally assaulted him, Chelios recalled. The incident left Franzen traumatized, and Chelios noted that several veterans on the team were furious with Babcock's treatment of their teammate. Chelios also recounted how Babcock had once essentially dared him to complain to management early in his Detroit tenure. "If you don't like it, you can see Kenny Holland. I'm sure he'll trade you," and I quote. In Chelios' view, Babcock's behavior toward players was a long-standing problem. It was coming back to haunt him. Not so much his coaching as the way he treated people, he remarked in 2019. However, the Johan Franzen story didn't come out for years. Franzen told a Swedish newspaper that even hearing Babcock's name gave him the chills. "I get the shivers when I think about it," Franzen said of that playoff incident. "It was really coarse, nasty and shocking, but that was just one of 100 things he did, the tip of the iceberg." According to Franzen, Babcock had a habit of singling out certain players for humiliation, often the quiet and reserved guys. He would lay into the nice team players, the guys who didn't say much. When they left the team, he went on to focus on me, Franzen revealed, saying the coach's verbal attacks were filled with horrible things. By Franzen's accounts, the abuse started in 2011 and only worsened. From 2011 on, I was terrified of being at the rink. It was just his attacks playing in my head each day and every day, Franzen admitted, noting that for a long time he struggled just to get out of bed in the morning due to the fear and depression that Babcock installed. Franzen, a Stanley Cup hero, ended up describing Babcock in the most damaging terms imaginable. "He's a terrible person, the worst I have ever met. He's a bully who was attacking people. It could be cleaners at the arena or anybody." These words hit the hockey world like a thunderbolt, laying bare the psychological toll that Babcock's coaching had taken on a player. The immediate action was widespread condemnation of Babcock. Media outlets and fellow players alike pointed to Franzen's story as evidence that Babcock's methods crossed the line from coaching into abusive behavior. In Detroit, where Franzen remains a respected figure, the revelations cast a shadow on the Red Wings' glory years under Babcock. Franzen himself has never been the same player after 2012. He played sparingly after 2015 due to post-concussion syndrome and anxiety, and many wondered how much of this premature decline was exacerbated by the trauma of Babcock's bullying. Franzen's story exposed the deep psychological toll Babcock could inflict on even veteran players, but his manipulative tactics weren't limited just to the seasoned. Just a few years later, in Toronto, a 19-year-old rookie named Mitch Marner would become the next target. Moving into Babcock's tenure with the Toronto Maple Leafs, one of the most infamous episodes involves young forward Mitch Marner. In the 2016 to 2017 season, Marner was a 19-year-old rookie trying to earn his ice time. Babcock, known for his emphasis on work ethic, decided to test the youngster in a bizarre way. During a team road trip early that season, he asked Marner to rank his teammates by how hard they worked, from hardest working to least working. This request was made privately, and Marner, feeling he had little choice, complied and wrote down a list of players in order. The real shock came next. Babcock took Marner's confidential list and shared it with the players, who were ranked near the bottom. Essentially, the coach exposed a rookie's assessment of his team's efforts. When word of this got back to Marner, he was mortified. The young winger burst into tears, and according to some reports, he feared he had betrayed his teammates. In 2019, Marner confirmed the incident was true, and said at first he didn't really know what to think when he realized that Babcock had shown the list around. Importantly, Marner noted that the team's veterans did not blame him. None of them took it to heart, and they knew it wasn't up to me, Marner said, expressing gratitude that his teammates basically shrugged it off and supported him. In other words, Leafs locker room recognized this was Babcock's doing, not Marner's. It was just surprising. I was lucky enough that the players were tight and very well knit together. This was just a lucky situation. Marner reflected on how potentially ugly the situation could have ended. When this story became public in November 2019, just days after Babcock was fired by Toronto, it generated outrage across the NHL. Players from other teams and media commentators universally blasted the tactic. "You just don't do that to a rookie," said one former NHLer on Twitter, capturing the sentiment that Babcock's stunt was a breach of trust. Babcock, for his part, apologized once the story came out. "I was trying to focus on work ethic with Mitch, focusing on role models. It ended up not being a good idea. I apologized at the time," Babcock told The Atlantic. Marner, however, said he doesn't recall an apology in the moment. In any case, Babcock acknowledged it was a major mistake. The Leafs front office and fans dismayed that the coach put a young player in such a compromising position. While Marner's incident highlighted how Babcock could undermine young players, his treatment of veterans didn't fare much better. Just a few years later, Jason Spezza, a respected NHL elder statesman, would face public embarrassment at the hands of Babcock in what he felt like a petty and deliberate power move. By 2019, Babcock was already on thin ice in Toronto due to playoff failures and reports of friction with some players. The handling of Jason Spezza at the start of the 2019 to 2020 season exemplified Babcock's contentious approach, and in hindsight, foreshadowed his downfall. Spezza, a veteran forward and former All-Star, had signed a league minimum contract with Toronto in the summer of 2019. At 36 years old, he knew he was slated for a fourth-line role, but he was eager to play in his hometown and have been reunited with GM Kyle Dubas for his leadership and experience. Toronto's season opener on October 2nd, 2019 was just not any game. It was against the Ottawa Senators, the franchise where Spezza spent most of his career and had been captain. It was the perfect stage to introduce Spezza as a Maple Leaf, fulfilling a childhood dream in front of family and friends against his old team. Instead, hours before the puck drop, Babcock shocked everyone by scratching Spezza from the lineup. He inserted Nick Shore as the fourth-line center, leaving Spezza to watch from the press box on opening night. The decision drew immediate criticism and confusion. Spezza himself was caught off guard. "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed, but I'm also a professional, and I'm going to get ready to go," Spezza told reporters after skating extra that morning. It was clear that Spezza was unhappy. "It's the opener. Definitely, you want to be a part of these games," he said. Officially, Babcock explained that Spezza wasn't sufficiently prepared for the new role, killing penalties, and that sitting him for the first game would buy him a few more days in practice before he would be in the next game. Despite the coach's explanation, many in the media saw it as a needless slight against a respected veteran. Toronto fans who gave Spezza a loud ovation during introductions, even though he wasn't playing, were confused on his behalf. Insiders speculated that Babcock simply didn't trust or never even wanted Spezza, noting that during training camp, Babcock had openly mussed about whether Spezza could keep up in a limited role, and he had scratched him in the final preseason game as well. It was an early season controversy the Leafs didn't need. Even Chris Chelios commented on the situation. What he did to Spezza in Toronto, those were the things that are so unnecessary. If the Spezza snub showed Babcock's disregard for the veteran's dignity, his next coaching stop would prove that nothing had changed. Hired by the Columbus Blue Jackets in 2023, Babcock didn't even make it to the opening night. His behavior sparked a scandal so invasive it forced him out before he even coached the game. After a couple of years away from the NHL, Babcock was given another chance by the Columbus Blue Jackets, who hired him in the summer of 2023. The appointment was met with some criticism due to his past issues, but Babcock claimed that he had reflected and changed during his time away. Unfortunately, before he even coached a single game for Columbus, a fresh controversy erupted that would end his tenure almost as soon as it began. In September 2023, during preseason preparations, a startling allegation surfaced on the popular hockey podcast Spitting Chicklets. Co-host Paul Bissonnette reported that a current Blue Jackets player had texted him about an incident involving Babcock. According to the text, Babcock was asking players, starting with the team captain, Boone Jenner, to hand over their phones and show him their personal photos. In Jenner's case, Babcock allegedly even airplayed the images onto his office television under the pretext of wanting to know the type of person Jenner was. Bissonnette characterized it as gross invasion of privacy, essentially coach-driven snooping. This information spread like wildfire across hockey media and social platforms. Given Babcock's history, many were inclined to believe the worst. However, the Blue Jackets and Babcock immediately pushed back. Within hours, the team released statements from both Babcock and Boone Jenner, attempting to clarify the situation. Babcock's statement explained that in the off-season meetings with players, I asked them to share off their phones family pictures as part of the process of getting to know them better. There was absolutely nothing more to it than that. He called the Chiclet story a gross misrepresentation and said he found it extremely offensive to have his meetings portrayed that way. Jenner, the team captain, backed the coach's account, saying he was happy to show Babcock pictures of his family. He then showed me pictures of his family. I thought it was a great first meeting. To have this blown out of proportion is truly disappointing, Jenner recounted. In essence, both men said it was a mutual sharing of family photos, nothing invasive. Johnny Gaudreau also chimed in, saying his meeting with Babcock was similarly positive and that he was a little upset to see the way it was handled and how it came out, but nothing you can do about it, he recounted. Despite those denials, the story didn't die, it only grew. Bissonnette and his co-host Ryan Whitney doubled down in the following days. They insisted they had multiple players, not just Jenner, confirming that Babcock's requests were uncomfortable and beyond normal coaching instructions. Whitney tweeted that any public refutations by players were effectively made under duress. When players from Columbus make a statement that the characterizations are false, just know that's bullcrap. Whitney wrote, alleging that Babcock put players in a no-win situation. Babcock is a complete weasel and shouldn't be coaching in the NHL, he added bluntly. As the host of a very popular podcast, The Crusade kept the spotlight on Columbus. The NHL and NHLPA took notice and launched an investigation within a day. The new NHLPA director, Marty Walsh, and associate director, Ron Hainsey, flew to Columbus to interview Blue Jackets players privately about the matter. What followed was essentially a fast-forwarded implosion of Babcock's comeback. By September 17, 2023, mere days after the story broke, Babcock resigned as head coach of the Blue Jackets. The NHLPA's inquiry had concluded, and while details weren't made public, it was clear that enough smoke was there to burn down Babcock's position. In an official statement, GM Jarmo Kekalainen called it a difficult decision on everyone's part, but necessary to keep the focus on the players. The Blue Jackets characterized Babcock's exit as a mutual decision and thanked him for working with them on a prompt resolution. In a press conference the next day, Kekalainen apologized to the team's players, acknowledging the turmoil. I apologize for any inconvenience or awkward situation this may have put them in. I'm extremely disappointed by what has transpired. He added that given Babcock's past, we understand the dynamics of hiring Mike. It's obviously fair to question or due diligence. At the end of the day, I believe that Mike Babcock deserved another opportunity to coach. Obviously that was a mistake, and that responsibility is mine. The Blue Jackets quickly promoted assistant coach Pascal Vincent to head coach, trying to move past the saga before the training camp. The photo controversy in Columbus became the final entry in Babcock's catalog of player grievances, and perhaps the most bizarre. For many, the Columbus incident proved that even after years of scrutiny, Babcock was still prone to the same controlling behaviors, and this time it cost him his job immediately. As of 2025, Mike Babcock's coaching future remains uncertain. He was once the NHL's highest paid coach and was seen as a Hall of Famer thanks to his Stanley Cup championship, 2 Olympic gold medals with Canada, and over 700 NHL wins. But today, his name is labeled with the cautionary tag. The controversial coach and his legacy is tarnished.